Summer 1944. Somewhere in France. A German reconnaissance pilot banks his aircraft over the Allied lines and photographs what he sees below. Tanks, dozens of them, spread across the fields in tactical formation. Artillery pieces, trucks, a full armored division, maybe two. He radios back to headquarters. The Americans are here, in strength, preparing to move. German commanders shift their reserves. Artillery is repositioned. Reinforcements are rerouted. They prepare to meet a force of 30,000 men. There are actually 1,000 men down there, and not one of those tanks is real. They are rubber, inflatable. Each one weighs less than 100 pounds and can be carried by two men. Each one looks, from the air, exactly like a Sherman tank. The men who inflated them are not soldiers in any traditional sense. They are artists, illustrators, designers. A fashion designer named Bill Blass, a painter named Ellsworth Kelly, a photographer named Art Kane. Men recruited from art schools and advertising agencies and theater companies. Men who were told when they enlisted that their particular skills would be useful to the war effort, and who had no idea until they arrived at their first briefing exactly how. This is the story of the Ghost Army, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, 1,100 men who fought the Second World War with rubber tanks, gramophone records, and imagination. Their story was classified for 50 years. Most people have still never heard of them. They saved an estimated 15 to 30,000 American lives, and they did it without ever firing more than a machine gun.
January 20th, 1944, Camp Forest, Tennessee. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops is officially activated. It is the first unit of its kind in the history of the United States Army, a mobile, multimedia, tactical deception force. The idea comes from two unlikely men. Major Ralph Ingersoll, a celebrity journalist who had been managing editor of The New Yorker, publisher of Fortune magazine, and founder of a New York newspaper. The New York Times once described him as a prodigiously energetic egotist. He is also, as it turns out, a man who understands theater, who understands that an audience believes what it sees, hears, and is told, if the performance is convincing enough. His partner is Colonel Billy Harris, a more traditional military man, but one who has studied British deception operations and understands their strategic value. Together, Ingersoll and Harris sell the United States Army on a radical idea. You don't always need more soldiers. Sometimes you need a better illusion. The British have already proved the concept. Operation Fortitude, the massive deception campaign ahead of D-Day, convinced Hitler that the invasion would land at Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy. Fake army groups, fake radio traffic, a whole phantom force that existed only on paper and in German intelligence files. The Ghost Army will do the same thing, but on the battlefield, in real time, right in front of the enemy. The recruiting is unusual from the start.
The Army puts out vague notices at art schools and design programs, looking for men with creative skills, unspecified duties. Many of the recruits are told almost nothing about what they are signing up for. Bernie Bluestein, 19 years old, sees a notice on the bulletin board at his Cleveland Art College in March 1943. He enlists. He has no idea, he will say later, how dangerous the assignment actually is. If the Germans figure out the deception, the men of the 23rd, who carry nothing heavier than a .50 caliber machine gun, will face a full armored response with almost no ability to defend themselves. It is not a comfortable thought. But in early 1944, most of them don't know it yet. The unit is organized into four components. The 603rd Camouflage Engineer Battalion handles visual deception. The inflatable tanks, trucks, artillery pieces, jeeps, and aircraft that form the physical backbone of the illusions. The 313th Signal Service Company Special handles sonic deception. Sound trucks with massive speakers that can broadcast the recorded sounds of an armored division moving at night from 15 miles away.
The 406th Combat Engineer Company provides security, real soldiers, trained fighters, who protect the rest of the unit while they work. And the Signal Company handles radio deception, operators who study the radio fingerprints of real units, the specific way individual operators tap their Morse code, and then impersonate those units completely, dot for dot, dash for dash. Together, these four components can simulate the presence of two full divisions, 30,000 men, from 1100. In May 1944, they sail for England. They are based near Stratford-upon-Avon. They train, they run exercises, they wait. 2 weeks after D-Day, they cross to Normandy and go to work.
Their first operation is called Operation Elephant, July 1944, Normandy. Their mission is to cover the movement of the 2nd Armored Division, to make the Germans think the division is still in place while it actually moves elsewhere. The men inflate their rubber tanks. They set up their sound trucks. The radio operators begin transmitting. It is, by their own later admission, not their best work. They are new to this. The deception is imperfect, the execution rough. But they learn. Each operation teaches them something. How to position the dummies so the shadows fall correctly. How to mix the sound recordings to match specific terrain. Tank sounds in open fields are different from tank sounds in forest, and German listeners on the other side of the line know the difference. How long radio operators can maintain an impersonation before the Germans begin to suspect. They learn fast. They have to. The stakes are not abstract. They are operating within a few kilometers of German positions, sometimes closer. There are 1,000 men pretending to be 30,000, and if the Germans ever call their bluff, there will be nothing between the 23rd and a German armored column except rubber tanks and sound recordings.
Operation Brest, August and September 1944. The Allies need to capture the port city of Brest on the western tip of Brittany. A substantial German garrison is dug in and refusing to surrender. The actual Allied force surrounding Brest is not large enough by conventional military calculation to convince the Germans that resistance is hopeless. The 23rd is assigned to make it look larger. They inflate their equipment around the perimeter. They run their sound trucks at night, broadcasting the sounds of reinforcements arriving, heavy equipment moving, a siege force assembling. The radio operators transmit traffic suggesting multiple divisions in position. Inside Brest, the German commander looks at his intelligence reports and sees himself surrounded by a force far larger than the one actually there. The garrison eventually surrenders. Brest falls. How much of that is the Ghost Army's contribution is impossible to measure exactly, but the illusion was there, and the garrison's will to resist was not infinite. The autumn of 1944. The Allied advance has stalled. The supply lines are stretched. The front has stabilized along a broad arc from the English Channel to the Swiss border. The 23rd moves with it. They operate in France, Belgium, Luxembourg. Each operation is different. Each requires a new script, new positioning, new radio personalities. The men have begun to think of themselves as actors in a traveling repertory theater, as one of their officers writes. The German army is their audience. Every night is opening night, and the reviews, when they come in artillery shells and panzer columns. By now, the 23rd has refined its craft to something approaching art. The visual deception team has learned that perfect camouflage is a mistake. Real units in the field are never perfectly hidden. Their equipment is slightly visible from the air. Their tracks are readable from reconnaissance photographs. Their positions show the natural disorder of genuine military activity. So the 23rd camouflages its rubber tanks imperfectly, deliberately. They study reconnaissance photographs of real armored units and replicate the look of a formation that is trying to hide but not entirely succeeding. The Germans see what they expect to see, a real unit doing what real units do. The sonic deception team has its own discipline. The sounds of an armored division moving at night were recorded at Fort Knox with the help of engineers from Bell Laboratories. Every sound,
Tank engines, track clatter, orders being shouted, equipment being moved was captured on wire recorders and brought to Europe. For each operation, the sound team mixes a program tailored to the specific scenario. They have learned timing. They have learned that the sounds must build gradually, the way a real unit moves, rather than beginning at full volume. They play the recordings on speakers mounted on half-tracks, powerful enough to carry 15 miles. On still nights, the sound of 30,000 soldiers who are not there drifts across the front lines and into German positions. And the radio operators. These are perhaps the most skilled of all. Each radio operator has a fingerprint, a specific rhythm and style in the way they tap Morse code, as distinctive as a handwriting. The Germans track these fingerprints. They know which operator belongs to which unit. When the 23rd assumes the identity of a real division, their radio operators must not only transmit the correct messages, they must transmit them in the correct style. They spend weeks studying recordings of specific operators before they are called upon to impersonate them. One wrong rhythm, one unfamiliar habit, and a German signals analyst on the other side of the line will know something is wrong. By the autumn of 1944, the men of the 23rd have settled into a rhythm that no military manual has ever described. Before each operation, officers study the unit they are about to impersonate. They memorize the insignia, the vehicles, the command structure. Soldiers sew the shoulder patches of the impersonated unit onto their uniforms. They drive into nearby towns, the cafes, the markets, the squares, and talk loudly about where they are going, what their unit is doing, what their orders are. They know that German intelligence uses civilian informants. They feed those informants exactly what they want the Germans to believe. A soldier sitting in a French cafe complaining about being moved to a new sector is not a security breach. He is the performance. He is the most convincing piece of the deception, because no one expects a real soldier to be part of the show. The whole unit becomes a cast. Every man, from the officers to the cooks, is playing a role. Lieutenant Fred Fox, one of the unit's officers, writes an internal memo that captures the philosophy perfectly. "We must remember," he writes, "that we are playing to a very critical and attentive audience. They must all be convinced. Not most of them, all of them. One skeptical German analyst, one signal that doesn't add up, one rubber tank seen from too close at the wrong moment, and the illusion collapses." The discipline required is extraordinary. These are not professional actors. They are soldiers from Ohio and New York and Tennessee, many of them in their early 20s, asked to maintain a performance under conditions of genuine danger for days at a time. They do it. December 1944, the Battle of the Bulge. Germany launches its last great offensive through the Ardennes forest. The Allied lines crack and bend. The 23rd finds itself suddenly in a war that has come to them. They are near Luxembourg when the German offensive begins. For a few days, they are not a deception unit. They are simply soldiers, armed with weapons insufficient to stop what is moving toward them, waiting to see which way the battle breaks. The battle breaks in the Allies' favor, slowly, painfully, at enormous cost, and the 23rd survives. They go back to work. In the final months of the war, as the Allied armies close in on Germany from west and east, the Ghost Army mounts its most ambitious operation. Operation Viersen, March 1945. The objective is the Rhine River crossing. The United States 9th Army is going to cross the Rhine, the last major natural barrier before the German heartland, and when it does, it needs the Germans to be looking somewhere else. The 23rd is given the job. They deploy more than 600 dummy vehicles along a stretch of the Rhine 10 miles south of the actual crossing point. Their sound trucks broadcast the sounds of engineers building pontoon bridges, the hammering, the splashing, the machinery of a river crossing in preparation. Their radio operators transmit the traffic of 2 full divisions assembling for assault. German commanders look at their intelligence and see exactly what the 23rd wants them to see. A massive American force preparing to cross the Rhine 10 miles south of the real crossing point. They move their reserves south to meet it. The 9th Army crosses the Rhine at the real location with minimal resistance. They enter Germany almost unopposed. The official Army history will later call Operation Viersen the Ghost Army's finest hour.
the last and best of their 22 major deceptions. The war in Europe ends on May 8, 1945. The 23rd Headquarters Special Troops returns to the United States in July. They are deactivated on September 15, 1945. Before they go home, they are given orders. You will not speak about what you did. You will not write about it. The unit's records are classified. The equipment is packed away. The rubber tanks, the sound trucks, the wire recordings, all of it disappears into the archives of the United States Army. For 50 years, the men of the Ghost Army go home and say nothing. Bill Blass becomes one of the most celebrated fashion designers in American history.
Ellsworth Kelly becomes a towering figure in modern art. Art Kane becomes a legendary photographer, the man who will, in 1958, gather 57 of the greatest jazz musicians alive onto a Harlem stoop for a single photograph that becomes one of the most famous images in the history of American music. They go to their careers, their families, their lives, and they say nothing about France, about Belgium, about the rubber tanks and the sound trucks and the nights spent a few kilometers from German lines pretending to be 30,000 men. In 1985, a Smithsonian Magazine article touches on the story. A few details emerge, but the unit remains officially classified until the mid-1990s. The full story is not publicly available until 1996. By then, many of the men are old. Some are gone. The story they kept for 50 years finally begins to come out in interviews, in documentaries, in books. In 2013, PBS produces a documentary. In February 2022, President Joe Biden signs the Ghost Army Congressional Gold Medal Act. The surviving members of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops receive the highest civilian honor the United States Congress can award. Some of them are in their 90s. They sit in Washington and accept a recognition that was 50 years late. They do not appear to be bitter about the delay. They appear, mostly, to be glad that someone finally knows.
Here is what the story of the Ghost Army tells us. War is usually understood as a contest of force. More men, more tanks, more artillery, more aircraft. The side with more of these things wins, usually. The Ghost Army understood something different, that the most powerful weapon in any conflict is not what you have, it is what your enemy believes you have. 1,100 men convinced German commanders repeatedly over the course of a year that they faced forces 10, 20, 30 times larger than the ones actually there. They did it with rubber and recordings and radio signals and the oldest weapon in human history, a good story told convincingly. They were artists who became soldiers, who became something the military had no name for until they invented it. The first mobile multimedia deception unit in American history. They saved an estimated 15,000 to 30,000 lives. They never got credit for it. They were sworn to secrecy and went home and built careers and raised families and said nothing for 50 years. Most people have still never heard of them. But somewhere in the French countryside, in Belgian fields, along the banks of the Rhine, the shadows of 30,000 soldiers who were never there still fall across the ground. And somewhere in Germany's wartime archives, there are intelligence reports describing divisions that existed only in the minds of 1,000 artists from New Jersey and Ohio and Tennessee, who decided, when their country needed them, that imagination was a perfectly good weapon for a war.